Hey guys, so in the last video I realized that I actually was not using the code here for the response code for your HTTP status. So there it is, and save. So next thing we're going to discuss is data checks, because when you're building your REST API, you want to make sure that the data that's coming in and the data that's going out is of a unexpected value, right? Because you don't want to send or receive data of which you don't expect and then process it, because you might be processing some data of which might be malicious, quote unquote. So, for example, here when we're receiving the data from the request JSON, we went straight and say data email as if we're expecting to say that the data is going to have email, which is fine in a sense, because, well, we know that when a person is signing up, we're expecting an email, right? But in this case, it's not necessarily safe for us to just say email here, because if there is no email in the data, it means the code is going to crash, the server is going to crash. Of course, we have error handling here, which is going to keep the server from just shutting down. But a good way to write this would be if email in data, then we can go ahead and indent this. So now we're almost certain that when we come to this point, there is a key value pair for email in the data that we're receiving from the client for this REST API. And then or else, I'm just gonna copy that. We want to return a fail. Let's say, please make sure all fields are in the data. And then that should be a bad request, because it does not have the correct values that we want. And here I also forgot to put in a proper response, because if the response is not acknowledged, we need to make sure that it's a fail, to say that there was an error inserting data into the database. Let's try again. This way we're just making our REST API a little bit more informative, a little bit more user-friendly, if I can say, when sending the data. So the other thing we want to check is the password, because not only is it going to have the email, but also the password. That's in data and username in data. That way we make sure that when we're entering the data into the database under the users table, we have the email, we have the password, and the username in that data object, so that when we're inserting the data in here, we know exactly what we're inserting. In fact, a better way, of which is actually much longer, would be inserted object. I'm just going to call it that, is equal to, and then we have that there to be a username. This is going to be data username, if I can type. And then I'm gonna do this for the password. I'm gonna do that for the email as well. And then from there, we go ahead and say the inserted object only has this. Because if we just insert the whole data object that's coming in as the JSON, the user or a malicious user might actually put in their own kind of data and then end up filling our database. Because here we're using MongoDB, which pretty much accepts anything and everything that you want to it, because it's not a structured database, because you can increase the number of columns and rows as you want, right? So we want to make sure that we're restricting the kind of data that's going into our database and not just accepting anything. So this video is talking about data checks. So you have to check the data before it goes in. The same way we're checking if the email is already being used, we can also check if the data that we want is the one that's coming through from the client side, right? And the other thing, not forgetting the created date. So I'm just gonna do that here. And the created date. So on top of that, we also want to make sure that the data that we're inserting is according to the preferred data type that we want. In this case, a string, right? So if you do that with Python, you're parsing the data that's going to come through whatever the email value is into a string. So the F here is just for format string. So it's going to format this into a string so that it can be sent to the database as a string and not just some random data type of which we might not want in our database, right? If I can type. So we can do this for all this data that we have. Shift, Control. Just using some VS Code shortcuts here to actually do this faster. So since Python is not a strongly typed language, we might be expecting any kind of data here. It might be an integer, it might be a double, it might be whatever data type that might come through. It might be a boolean. So to make sure that when we're inserting the value, it's a string, so that we don't have type errors as we're parsing the data or sending it through to the user, you make sure to parse it as a string as you're sending it into the database and even back to the client. So this video has been about data checks. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I haven't uploaded in a while, but I'll try and upload more as we go forward. Thank you for watching.